Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turned out a poem 701, A Thought Went Up My Mind today. Now this is fascinating. Emily playing around with that little rhyme, hickory dickory dock, the mouse went up the clock and all of that. In many ways in this poem though, we're back to poem 501. You'll maybe remember this one. This world is not conclusion. A species stands beyond, invisible as music, but positive as sound. It beckons and it baffles. Philosophy don't know. And through a riddle at the last, sagacity must go to guess it. Puzzle scholars to gain it, men have borne contempt of generations and crucifixion shown. Faith slips and laughs and rallies, blushes if any see, plucks at a twig of evidence and asks a vain the way. Much gesture from the pulpit, strong hallelujahs roll. Narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul. This, of course, one of Emily's greatest poems about the whole notion of inspiration. And here we are now, back to the whole process of the mind. Now, the great biographer Wisher said it this way about Emily, celebrating her genius. The smallest of her intellectual poems are those that merely record a mental phenomenon. She, Emily, was curious to see how the brain worked, eager to find words for every thought she ever had, as though thoughts were a kind of interfauna, and she, a new atom, naming the animals. Such notes on the mind could have been written only by a poet who was ceaselessly interested in the natural history of the intellect. For instance, it teased her, it's interesting he uses that word given our study of Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn, after she had studied her ideas until each wore a familiar aspect to encounter one that she ought to be able to recognize but could not identify. And then Wisher quotes here poem 701. Now, I think it's fascinating to recognize Emily as a psychological poet. We've been saying this for a while now. Our assumptions that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily's our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 700 poems. We just finished with 700. You've seen Balloons Set. And you'll be able to place this poem within the context of a number of other poems. Now, Emily's sister, Lavinia, said it this way, quote, about Emily, she had to think. She was the only one of us who had to do that. The critic, Robert Weisbach, has said it this way, spoken of Emily as a poet who never stops thinking and who takes us with her as her thoughts advance, digress, or reverse themselves as we read a single poem. Now, this is an amazing poem because it's a poem about a poem she forgot, or a thought that she forgot, which possibly would have become a poem. And in that regards, Emily is going to, what? Capture, in poetic language, what all of us have experienced. What is it they say about great poets? They show, they don't tell. Here is a classic example of how that works. A thought went up my mind today that I have had before, but did not finish. Some way back, I could not fix the year, nor where it went, nor why it came the second time to me, nor definitely what it was, have I the art to say. But somewhere in my soul, I know I've met the thing before. It just reminded me 'twas all, and came my way. No more. Now we're going to finish with our comments here on Shelley's defense of poetry. And how potable gold has a tendency to come and then leave. Notice she begins by capitalizing the word thought. Inspiration here, possibly even another poem. Went up my mind today. Now again, mind for Emily is referenced in 69 of her poems. And in some ways we have the old joke of the mouse going up the clock, right? In other words, there's a thought that came to me. I have had before, notice we'll go from before to year, this idea that she's trying to reclaim something. Now, we've all had this experience where we had a thought and then it went away. And then it's, what is it, Prufrock says, T.S. Eliot's Prufrock, it is impossible to say just what I mean. We've given full lectures, of course, on that poem at learnstrong.net. She says, a thought went up my mind today, that I've had before, but did not finish this challenge of completion. Notice the last word of the poem is more, as in no more, and did not finish some way back. I could not fix the year. Now, I love this line. It's one more reason, this informal diction, one more reason we called our series Chats with Emily. And she's like, I'm trying to remember, how long ago was it? What year was it that I had that thought? I can't fix the year. Notice the word fix. Brilliant, Emily. This may be the word of the poem. Trying to fix, trying to hold on to something. It's like trying to package water, as the great Alan Watts has said in The Wisdom of Insecurity. The inability to hold on to this thought. Then the second 4 lines, nor about the thought, where it went. Now that's a fun one. Okay, so you have a thought, and then it's gone. Gone where? What do you mean gone? And what do you mean a thought? Like, she speaks of this thought as if it is a thing. She'll even capitalize it at the end of the poem. Where it went, dash, nor why it came. This idea again of the power of inspiration and the longing of the muse, the invocation of the muse is what we've called in our study of Homer and the like, and Virgil. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. The second time to me. So this is the second time the thought has returned. But she's like, where did it go? And why did it come in the first place? Nor, definitely, notice back to the word fix, what it was even. In other words, I know I've had these thoughts, but I can't quite hold on to them. Have I the art, notice capitalized, to say, and of course note the irony, she says, I don't have the art to be able to talk about it, but notice what is she actually doing but telling us in beautiful poetry that very loss, if you will, the inability to fix, the inability to hold on to. But, she says it, somewhere, and then she'll say it, in my soul. Now again, in 67 of her poems, she references soul. It appears in 141 times in the Johnson edition. But somewhere in my soul, I know, notice we'll go from I know to no more. I know I've met the thing before. In other words, she almost thinks of the thought as something tangible, something physical. Pure Emily. Notice capitalized even. The thing before, and then the dash, and then it just reminded me. Again, the use of the word just, it's brilliant. Just enough, dash. 'Twas all, dash. Again, this may be the phrase of the poem. That's it, that's all I got. And came, notice twice referenced back to nor where it came and why it came. And came my way, no more. By the way, notice the slant rhyme of before and year and me and say, but then notice the exact rhyme of I know and then no more. It's almost as if Emily is building climactically towards the capacity to release, and then it was gone, and it's out of it's beyond me. The thought came and it went. Well, what are we going to do with a poem like this at 2A? Well, I think our argument is that a thought or an idea is a precious thing. Inspiration is a precious thing, and I think Emily was constantly struggling with the questions of this poem. Where do these poems go? Well, of course, these are the questions we ask as well when we meet these brilliant poems. Where do they come from, these ideas? Where do they go? The inability for her to hold on to them and let them go. Notice a second time in this poem it comes back. Maybe Emily's suggesting, just because an idea comes and leaves doesn't mean it isn't going to return. It might come back again. At 2B, I love the tone of this poem. Notice it is whimsical. It's almost, she's not dreading, she's not upset, it doesn't seem. She's just more like, you know what I'm talking about? I can't fix the year, but I had this thought once before, and now here it is, back again. A physical thing as well. Now, we promised that we would return to Shelley's defense of poetry. We've given lectures on it at learnstrong.net. In 1840, of course, you'll recall that after reading a composition in which a friend and a fellow poet jokingly claimed that poetry no longer had a place in society, Percy Bysshe Shelley was troubled. It seemed to him possible that this view was in fact becoming widely held. Ironically, of course, it is the position of today. Poetry, really? What's the point? Some of you have even referenced that you're doing this study with us and you're now 700 poems in, and maybe one or two of the people in your life are like, dude, what are you doing? This is poetry. It's a complete and total waste of time. In response, of course, Shelley wrote Defense of Poetry. And here are some of the classic lines, just to enjoy them again. Poetry is indeed something divine. It is at once the center and circumference of knowledge. Poetry is not like reasoning, a power to be exerted according to the determination of the will. A man cannot say, I will compose poetry. The greatest poet even cannot say it. For the mind in creation is as a fading coal, which some invisible influence, like an inconstant wind, awakens to transitory brightness. This power arises from within, like the color of a flower, which fades and changes as it is developed, and the conscious portions of our nature are unprophetic either of its approach or its departure. Poetry turns all things to loveliness. It exalts the beauty of that which is most beautiful, and it adds beauty to that which is most deformed. It marries exaltation and horror, grief and pleasure, eternity and change. It subdues to union under its light yoke all irreconcilable things. I mean, if ever there was a line to describe Emily's poetry, it's that one, huh? And now to finish. It transmutes all that it touches, and every form moving within the radiance of its presence is changed by wondrous sympathy of an incantation of the spirit which it breathes. Its secret alchemy turns to potable gold the poisonous waters which flow from death through life. It strips the veil of familiarity from the world and lays bare the naked and sleeping beauty which is the spirit of its forms. Well, I mean, again, when we read Shelley in defense of poetry, we can't help but look at a poet like Emily Dickinson and say, there's her genius. She's able to accomplish exactly what Shelley is talking about in defense of poetry. Finally, to finish a poem like this and to own it, a time for you when you had an idea, but it was gone, and maybe the next time it will return and you can write a poem about it. Thank you.